Great, I think we should start the evening. I know most people might be coming in, but I know we're anxious to listen to Mary. Let me know if you can't hear me. You can't hear me. I sound like I'm so loud. I'm in my own ears. That's the problem. All right. Tell me again later on if you can't hear me. It's very exciting to have you here tonight. It's our summer meeting kickoff, and we're excited to have Mary Calvi here to speak to us about her new book. But before we do that, just let me do a few thank yous. All right, first of all, I want to thank the Friends for sponsoring this event and also for all that they do for the library. Right. And we also have board members here, present and past. So we always appreciate their leadership and their guidance. We're very, very fortunate to have good friends and a good board. And good staff. Don't forget the staff. The staff the one who put this all together. All right. I know you filled out a raffle ticket, so we're going to have raffles at the end when Mary's finished speaking. There's books for sale, and I understand they are deeply discounted. So make sure you hit that, and don't forget the refreshments too. All right. Just a very she'll be signing. Yeah, Mary will sign your books. All right, just a very brief background on Mary, in case you are not aware. She is a 14-time New York Emmy Award-winning journalist. She's a CBS anchor. She is. This is the second time Mary has been here. We were fortunate to have her on her first book when it was published, and her titles are all very long. So her first book was Dear George, Dear Mary, a novel of George Washington's first love. And that book I understand as the basis of the Smithsonian Channel documentary. And that's one of the books that are for sale tonight. All right, I want to turn this over now to Mary so she can tell us about her second novel, If a Poem Could Live and Breathe, a novel of Teddy Roosevelt's first love, which is based on the love letters of Roosevelt and his first love, Alice Lee. So, Mary, it's all yours.
Oh, it's so lovely to see everybody here tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. And what a gorgeous night we had, right? Thankfully, John Elliott did his job and we had some good weather. So I just want to say, as we're going through, feel free to ask me anything, like what time I get up in the morning or anything that you would like, whether it be about research, about writing, about journalism, or just about anything. You know, I am so willing to talk to you about whatever you would like. It's such a great opportunity to come out here to Rockville Center again, so thank you so much for having me. And a big thank you to On the Road Books. Peggy and Carol are here, and Carol is an author. Her book comes out in September, and I am really excited about it. It is called Before She Was a Finley. So that is coming out. She's been working really hard on that. And you know what it is? The book industry is such a loving, wonderful family that I have really enjoyed being a part of. It was nothing I'd ever really thought would be in my future, and I'll explain that to you in a moment. But being that I am here, I am really thrilled to be here and to be with you as readers and to launch the summer program. I'm really excited, so thank you for having me. Being here in Long Island is extra special because Teddy Roosevelt had such a home here in Oyster Bay. And what was really exciting for me when I was starting the research here was taking a look at the man that we know as the 26th president. If you look on the corner there, we know our Teddy Roosevelt and how we're used to seeing him. But what I was looking at was a Teddy Roosevelt at 19 years of age, and just to the left of that picture is Teddy Roosevelt at 19. I was able to see this picture, the original, and so many others that are basically in storage and they've never seen the light of day. So it was quite an honor for me to be able to find this treasure trove of not just photos, these are tintypes actually when you see them originally, but also letters of Teddy Roosevelt. And the reason why I had gone into the research, and just before I go, I just really love this photo because Teddy's dressed in the nines, in this great suit, three-button suit, and these are his pals at Harvard. He was a New Yorker, so he really wasn't accepted at Harvard at first, so he had to really make his way. But the reason why I had gone into this research is that Teddy Roosevelt's first love, Alice Lee, is really kind of trashed in the history books. And, many of the historians have called her unintelligent, incapable of spiritual growth. In fact, they said that if Alice had stayed in his life, and they actually wrote this, that Teddy would have committed suicide from sheer boredom. And, I was kind of really, I wasn't so happy about that. And I thought, well, that's not quite right. The reason why is because I had looked at his diary entries, and his diary entries tell a very different story. Teddy Roosevelt, after meeting this woman, Alice Lee, his first love, was completely taken with her. And his diary entries are very clear. And these are just a couple of notes in them. And this was at the time he was with her and had just met her. And he says, I doubt if any man was ever as happy as I am. I always enjoy myself, but I've never been so happy or deserving as the last few months. I am so absolutely enthralled, couldn't be happier. He is just so completely in love, and he hasn't even gotten on a date with this woman. So that was a lot of fun to find him trying so desperately to find this woman and to be able to meet her, and really worked hard at winning over Alice Lee. The letters are also in storage and have never seen the light of day either. And in fact, most of the historians, and I think everything that has ever been written before this time, was that the letters between the two of them had been destroyed. And it's just too bad they're all gone. Well, I didn't quite believe that after seeing the diary entries. I thought I understood so many letters between the two of them. And I thought, well, if he was so happy with her, enthralled by this beauty, would he destroy the love letters, or might he have kept them safe? And so that was my impetus for charging in and seeing if I could find these letters. And lo and behold, I was stunned when I did find the letters, and it was really a sheer moment of excitement, I can't tell you, when I realized that they all did exist. They had not been destroyed. And what an honor it was for me to be able to look at these originals and transcribe them. Truthfully, I felt like I was intruding because they are very intimate and very personal. Some of them, you're seeing just what I did was I had to make exact replicas of them, and I actually brought the exact replicas so you can see them. These are the ones that I actually used. This one's really quite lovely. It's written by Alice, and it starts, "My dearest Teddykins." And I thought, this is so adorable. And this is an exact replica of a letter that Teddy wrote. And I just love the size of it, and if you look at it up close, it's quite beautifully written, and also just to see his handwriting at 19, what was going through his mind. So I wanted to tell you some of that was going through his mind, because it was just so much fun to be able to explore it, because it was a very key time in his life. Teddy Roosevelt was a very sick young man before he went to Harvard. Many of you know Teddy's story. I probably don't even need to tell you, but he had terrible asthma, and he didn't go to school as other children would go in New York City because of this debilitating illness. And so the fact that he got to Harvard, number one, and he goes off to Harvard his first time away, and Teddy Roosevelt at the time wanted to be a scientist, and he was a bit of a nerd, I think you would call him at the time, and he was actually a taxidermist too, so all really fascinating pieces of information. So this was a moment, it was his time to sort of become the man he was to become, that man in the arena, that man who would charge into the wilderness. And so it was so curious to find out how you go from that to the Teddy Roosevelt we know as the 26th president. So let me give you an example of what I found in these letters. And I had access to his diaries, so I could tell what he was doing every day. He wrote in them every day, so the journal entries are very clear. And so I knew every time he went to visit Alice and what he was trying to get out of it. He was trying to get a photo with her. And this is just one of the letters that he wrote a little later into the relationship. But I mean, just take a look at this. It says, I worship you so that it seems almost desecration to touch you. And yet when I'm with you, I can hardly let you a moment out of my arms, my purest queen. I mean, you know, what am I supposed to do with that? So I thought, oh my goodness, well, I'm in. You know what I mean? Once you read that, you're like, okay, well, now I need to know exactly what was going on. So here is our girl. And this is her right here, and she is in the white on the far left. And I don't know if all of you can see it, but I probably would guess that you know where Teddy is if you look at the picture, because he's the one looking adoringly at Alice. And that's how we find him in almost every photo he is in with her. So this is before they actually were courting each other and the time he was really trying to get her to go out on one date with him, before he actually fell in love with her and actually married Alice. So let's get into the story of Teddy and tell you a little bit about this beautiful relationship that they developed. She was hard to get, I have to say, and she was quite a feminist. This was in 1880, you know, women's suffrage was really not, we were not at the heart of that yet, but yet she was very strong. This one I really love, where Teddy says here, I don't know if you can see it, but I actually have the exact replica, so please come over and take a look at it. He says that at any rate, you will have 2 weeks complete rest at Oyster Bay, and then you shall do just as you please in everything. He underlines everything. And they did get together at Oyster Bay and have some moments together, and that was quite fun. You know, beautifully written letters like, oh my darling, I do so hope and pray I can make you happy. I shall try very hard to be as unselfish and sunny-tempered as you are. So now, who is Alice, you might be asking? Alice was quite glorious and beautiful, but not just beautiful physically, but also beautiful on the inside and intellectually. And her letters to him are really beautiful as well. She took a little while to get to know Teddy, but when she did, I think she was all in. And these are just some of her beautiful letters that, again, have been in the dark for all of these years. I did have an opportunity to supply all of the transcriptions to all of the associations and libraries connected to Teddy Roosevelt, because I believe that this part of his life was quite telling, this coming of age of Teddy Roosevelt, and I think very impactful to his world for a number of reasons. One being Alice, but also his change in how he started thinking about women, and why he decided to go into politics to begin with. I mean, these are just some of the other letters that you could please take a look at if you'd like, but he calls her, my blessed little heart's darling, darling Queenie. He says, you know, best beloved, darling Alice, darling baby. I mean, he has all these beautiful nicknames for the two of them. Their relationship was, well, he says it very clearly, it was love at first sight. And I'll just read you how I wrote love at first sight. You know, we hear love at first sight so often, but I took a moment to say, well, what would that have been like through Teddy Roosevelt's eyes, this idea of love at first sight? So I'll give you an idea of how I wrote it, and you know, please give me your feedback, because I would love to hear what your thoughts are about love at first sight and how Teddy might have seen it. Theodore could feel warmth cascade from the top of his head to his toes. She was alluring in a classical sort of way, perfectly symmetrical in shape, balanced between delicate and sharp. A button of a nose tilted up slightly, cheekbones sat high, and a small mouth and preciously plump lips on a face with dewy skin shivering as if aglow from the inside. Alice Hathaway Lee, my classmate Theodore Roosevelt, she is introduced to him. Eyes the shade of crystal clear ocean in which he wished to immerse himself, froze him in place. Alice Hathaway Lee curtsied. The prosody of her name sounded heavenly, the assonance of the A's in Alice and Hathaway, the hard stress at the end of Lee, the consonants of I in Alice and Lee, and the triptych pattern in the first two beats like a pleasant fall, Alice Hathaway. Struck with such fervor, he was amazed. His tongue found a way to form words. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Alice Hathaway Lee. He waited for what seemed like an eternity to hear what voice came in return from artistry in the human form. When I was thinking about this relationship between Teddy Roosevelt and Alice at the very beginning, for Teddy, it was really like pure poetry. I mean, she was a poem to him. So deep was his feelings for her in his diary entries that he really felt a real closeness to her. And I wonder what drew him to Alice. And it was quite clear when I started looking into our Alice Lee. She is here. You can see her pretty clearly. She's really just beautiful. And she's constantly dressed gloriously. She's always surrounded by friends and people who support her as well. So it was really nice to be able to meet a woman in the Gilded Age, but actually to have her letters, because most of them were destroyed, honestly. Women in the 1800s and the 1700s, their letters don't really exist. So to be able to find her writing, to understand what was going on in her head, you'd really be surprised at how much was going on in there in this time. And so it was really an exciting adventure to be able to explore their relationship. This is young Teddy here with his great mutton chops on the side. And he writes quite a bit about his desire to take her to a portrait studio and get a picture with him. They had not quite started courting yet. She wasn't 18 yet. She hadn't had her debutante ball. So this was her at 17 and Teddy at 19. They're sitting together, but I really enjoyed this third wheel in the photo session. And I wanted to find out everything I could about Cousin Rose. And Cousin Rose attended most of the dates that they had together. So I really, really loved her as a character, and I was able to add her in and explored her relationship with the two of them, and actually had a really great discussion with her descendants. And we talked quite a bit about Rose and the Saltonstall family of Boston. They lived right next to each other, and that's how Teddy met Alice. It was Rose's brother who attended Harvard with Teddy and invited him over, and Teddy was smitten from day one. So he really writes a lot about how he was trying to get to this photo studio in his journal, and here it was. He finally gets it. The originals are so beautiful. These are just replicas, and you can certainly take a look at them if you would like. One thing that was really essential for me was this understanding of, well, how did Alice change Teddy Roosevelt? Of course, how impactful was she to his life as a man, but also as a political figure? And this was really essential to it. It looks like a whole lot of words, but let me tell you, let me see if I have it right here. So as I was researching Teddy Roosevelt at Harvard, the historians all wrote about a thesis Theodore Roosevelt had written for his senior professor, calling for women to have rights. And they basically would quote 2 lines from Teddy's thesis. But I wasn't interested in 2 lines. I wanted the whole thesis, because the thesis is a pretty large body of work. So I searched for, I think 2 years for this thesis, until a Harvard archivist finally said to me, "Mary, you're searching and searching, you're not going to find it." And I said, "Oh no." She goes, "Well, the reason why you're not going to find it is because it wasn't a thesis at all. It was actually a speech that Theodore Roosevelt delivered at commencement ceremonies at Harvard University." Now, let me explain why this was huge to me, and literally almost had me falling over. I mean, I couldn't quite believe it. In 1880, women couldn't go to Harvard. Sorry, women, you're just not smart enough, your brains would go to mush if you studied too much, and you're just not capable, ladies, of actually getting a Harvard education. However, Theodore Roosevelt gets up before these Harvard folks and says the complete opposite. He basically gets up there and says, women have a right to an education just like every man. Theodore Roosevelt gets up and says, women should be lawyers if they want. Women should own the property and be part of the inheritance, and women should even keep their name upon marriage if they would like to. What? I mean, I can't imagine what the reaction must have been. I mean, you're talking 150 years ago. So I can't imagine that they were that accepting of it. However, it's just a few months later that, lo and behold, Harvard accepts women in education. And this was really exciting for me for a number of reasons, because one of the reasons was I believe his Alice helped change his mind. And I think because of her, we had a different Harvard after that. Now, this speech was so essential to me that I went and I actually got the original. This is a replica, but it's 8 pages and it's quite lovely. And it's clearly not a thesis. Do you know why? There's a lot of mistakes. He actually has spelling errors and grammatical errors. And I thought, no way was he going to hand this into a professor. So why historians never went searching for this, I don't know. But for me, it was really an exciting piece of information to see that transition from Teddy Roosevelt to a man who would then become the president of the United States. And that I really enjoyed being able to explore and find. What a journey it was to be able to find him and to be able to see the both of them. Now, let me explain to you that this story is a beautiful romance, but it's heartbreaking too, because sometimes stories don't end the way you want. I don't want to give it away. I'm sure many of you may know, or some of you may know about their relationship. But to be able to see a woman in the 1800s doing things differently, pushing the envelope and trying really hard to make a change was really exciting for me, and the reason why I was so interested in being able to tell the story of the two of them. These are some other beautiful photos of Alice that just are also sitting in storage, but I was able to get the digital images so I could do it as a presentation for all of you. I've been pushing as hard as I can to tell them, hey, I think you need to focus more on this relationship and a young Teddy, because I think it's a story that many people should hear more about. If a poem can live and breathe, some people have asked me about the title and why that title. It's really because that's how Teddy Roosevelt saw this relationship. It was just a poem that he just breathed life into, and he worked so hard at this. It's been said, and Teddy said it himself, that after his relationship with Alice, Teddy Roosevelt dropped everything and moved out to North Dakota. I'm sure some of you may know this. And he lived out there for about 1.5 years. And he many times had said that if it hadn't been for that journey and that time out there, that he may never have been president, because he had been through just the best and the worst that life had to offer. And from there, it was where he gained the strength to be able to be the leader of the country. And so it was an exciting journey and a beautiful opportunity. And so, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. And again, a big thank you for coming here. The one thing that I wanted to say is that if you've read about Teddy Roosevelt, and many of you know who he is, I think that you'll find he was very different than what historians have told us. He was very romantic and very kind and gentle in many ways. And who would think, the bully and the man in the arena really had a soft heart. It was said that after Alice, Teddy Roosevelt never actually said the name Alice again. And the historian said, well, she was meaningless in his life. So was she meaningless in his life, or was he just so heartbroken that he couldn't say the name Alice again? I seem to believe the latter. And I wonder if all of you would think the same after seeing it. But that's where I feel really strongly that's why I felt the story needed to be told, and her voice needed to be shared, because she was wronged for too long. And I think she had a lot to say. So anyhow, I don't want to keep you here until next month, but I will. But I'm here to answer anything you might question. Where did I find the letters? Of course. So when I started on the adventure and I started looking at the journal entries and the diary entries, I decided to look up everything I could find in regard to Alice and those who came after Alice, her descendants, and her great-granddaughter's name came up in a search that she had made a donation to Harvard of correspondence of her great-grandmother. And I thought, correspondence, that's maybe what I'm looking for. Who would have thought? And that's really what began. And so I went to Harvard and to this beautiful mahogany library, as you can imagine, and they're just gorgeous. And I had made a request. I had been there before during my research about George Washington. One of his love letters is there, George Washington, by the way, and that's quite incredible. So that was for my first book, but for the second, I kind of knew the folks there, and I said, I'm looking for this very specific donation by this family. And I had to provide them the collection and the box number and all of that, which you can find. It takes a little bit of work. But I went up and they welcomed me in, and they said, there were about maybe a dozen long mahogany tables, and there are presidential portraits, and it's quite glorious in there. And so they said, well, just pick a table. All you could bring in there is your phone and something to write on and a pencil. So that's all I had with me. And so I sat at a table and had made the request, of course. And so they came out with a box. And I said, oh, when I looked through it, it wasn't that. This was 10 years later with the second one. Her name was Eden. And they were much more business-like letters, back and forth. So I thought, oh, darn it. Okay, we don't have it. And then, I kind of like was sitting back like, oh, made this journey and there's nothing here. So the archivist came back over to me and said, I think I may have gotten you the wrong collection. You'll have to wait. And so this took a long while because this collection was like down in storage in another building. It was a long story, as you can imagine. So the time was ticking away, but they did bring me a box. It was about this large, and they put it at the table. And you have to be very careful, of course, because these letters are 150 years old. So carefully, I opened the box, and there it was. Could you imagine? Letters of Teddy Roosevelt at 19 years of age, and also the letters of Alice to Teddy. It was like to and from and back and forth and back and forth. And really, I was like in their world. I would have stayed there for a week if I could, but of course it was closing. So they did allow me to just take images of each of the letters. And after the library was about to close, so I had to wrap it up, and I thought, well, let me take a picture of myself, like a silly selfie, just so I could tell people that they're never gonna believe me. And so I took out my phone, and I was like, I had the letters there, and I was taking a picture, and I said, oh no. So at the end of the mahogany table, right on the wall, was a large portrait of Teddy Roosevelt. And I thought, oh boy, I hope he's okay with this. Because when I tell you it was intrusion, it really was. And it was just like so fabulous. So that really, once I found that, then I was really in it. I couldn't help but just be knee deep in the research and to try to find everything I could. The diaries are at the Library of Congress, but those are very accessible. In fact, you could probably digitally get a number of those images as well if you wanted to look at the diaries of Teddy Roosevelt. So those are more easily accessible. Nothing is really transcribed, so that I had to do myself, and that took a long time.
Do you have a theory about why they would have said she was such a it was kind of a person?
Sure.
What's your feeling about why they would dismiss her?
This is going to be so mean to say, but I'll tell you what, I think it was his second wife that did her in. Yeah, so from what I can understand, the second wife, wasn't all that excited to talk about Alice, and so I think that's what happened. And I think the historians believed her, and maybe she didn't know. This is really interesting. So here are these beautiful love letters. They're all preserved perfectly. The photos are all there, perfectly preserved. So where did they go? So now Teddy Roosevelt, so if maybe his second wife didn't know they existed, maybe he told her something else, I'm not sure. But what she told historians and what the truth was were very different. How that came to be, I don't know. But I think that's what happened. And I think, when a nonfiction book is written, I think everyone who comes after that is going back to that basis, that baseline of like, okay, well, the letters don't exist, the photos don't exist, they were ripped out of their frames, nothing's still around. She was meaningless in his life. He didn't say her name ever again because there was no need to say her name. And so maybe that's, yes. Well, from what I understand, he called her Baby Lee instead of Baby Alice. So really interesting. So Teddy and Alice had a child. Her name is Alice. And Alice Roosevelt Longworth was, I guess, what they would consider a rebel at the time in the White House. And some of the things she wanted to do were so rebellious, like she wanted to wear pants. And she wanted to attend meetings with men. what? But she also kind of badmouthed some people too. So I really had a lot of fun reading her work too. Alice Roosevelt Longworth is quite a fabulous person to research as well. I really enjoyed that, and thank you for bringing that up. But it's my understanding that he would call her Baby Lee, so he couldn't say that Alice name again. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes. Alice did live a long life. She did, yes. And she wrote an autobiography as well. I had a chance to read it, and I really got so much out of it. And quite a bit of the character of Alice that's in the book is really based on some of Alice Roosevelt Longworth's characteristics as well. So she did live a long life, yeah. So it was really interesting to be able to find out about the woman who gave birth to her and determine what she was like at the time. And did the daughter take after her in many ways? And I think she did. So that was really, really something.
If he married Alice, why did they say he would have committed suicide?
Yes. So he did marry Alice, but Alice never became the first lady. And yeah, and so, you know, the historians have said that she was a bore. I don't know quite why, but I think that maybe back to what we were talking about. Yeah, and it's too bad, you know, and she never really had a chance to defend herself, unfortunately. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes? Well, thank you for that. You know, writing a book is really a great honor, truthfully, and when you can find materials, it's really a great honor. I just want to shout out Steve Cohen, who's in the back of the room, and Debbie, who are here. Steve Cohen really was instrumental in helping me have my first book published, and the reason why I bring all of this up is that if you don't have good people on your side, it's very difficult to get any of this done. So Steve, thank you for allowing me to have George Washington's story published. After George Washington's story published, the editors and Steve came to me and said, we'd really be interested in having you do a second book. And that's how the Teddy Roosevelt story came to life. And I possibly have an opportunity to do a third book. And if that comes to life, I've started the research and the writing. It would be of Abigail Adams and her witnessing of the American Revolution, which unfolded before her very eyes. I mean, she watched Charleston burn to the ashes with little John Quincy in her arms when John Adams was in Philadelphia, you know, getting things done with the Continental Congress. And looking at her letters, you know, there are 1,200 of her letters. She's really the foremost voice for women in the 1700s, and she was a true feminist. She was on our side early on, and that's 250 years ago. So I'm in the midst of it now, and I'm hopeful that something will come of that, and I'll let you know when it does, but thank you for asking that question. You know, I think that if any of you are thinking about historical research, maybe of your own families, or maybe of a historical figure, now is an amazing time to do so, because the digital archives and the physical archives have collided. And what I mean by that is that if I had done this research maybe even 10 years ago, I would have had to go from box to box and place to place, especially with the first novel of George Washington 250 years ago. Those archives that I had to go, I would have had to go to like London and Canada and California and everywhere, which I did do some of that, but I was able to pinpoint where these documents were. And that's because digitally the collections are now listed and you can actually look them up. So if anybody is interested in any of that, please ask me, because that's what I've been doing quite a bit. Not everyone likes dusty basements and things like that, but I like them a lot. I don't know what it is. So I'm just drawn to it, and I think I'm just drawn to being able to tell stories of people that deserve their voice to be heard. In the first book that I wrote in regard to George Washington, he fell in love with a woman whose name was Mary. You know Martha, but this was before Martha. There was a woman named Mary, and she was the richest woman in America. Mary was named a traitor in the American Revolution, and the richest woman in America lost everything. I mean, they auctioned it off piece by piece. And I was really fascinated by that story because it was, and this is why Smithsonian Channel did the documentary based on my research and followed me around. It was really quite fun, but it also put me at odds with George Washington historians. And so I had to defend my argument that George Washington, who was 22 years old at the time and fell in love with this American heiress, he was actually fighting with the Brits during this time, meaning during the French and Indian War. He was in the British Army, and he was willing to give his life for the British Army. This would have been years before the American Revolution when we kicked the Brits out. But he was fighting with the British, and he meets this heiress, Mary, falls in love with her. And lo and behold, his own commanders in the British Army also love the heiress. And they would also like to marry the richest woman in America. So many of them, and I found the document that listed, I mean, maybe 50 of them were after her. And so they do George wrong. I mean, they betray him and they deceive him, and they even write articles against him. This was really fun. This is one of the articles that I was able to find where they call him a gambler and a womanizer and just the worst leader. Could you imagine George Washington? This is George and Mary, by the way. I was able to find this gorgeous painting of young George and Mary, the really, really wealthy woman. Anyhow, Mary ends up not choosing George. And about a week after it was official, George quits the British Army and just hates the British Army and blames them for ending his relationship with the heiress. Anyway, he holds on to this hatred for about 20 years and then becomes the general in the American Revolution and kicks them out of town. Well, believe me, when I was in the middle of this, it was like putting together a massive puzzle that every piece fit together perfectly. And I was quite stunned by all of this. And that's when I took the research to my friend Steve here and said, what am I to do with this research? And he said, well, you should write a book. And I thought, oh my goodness, that was not at all what I had ever imagined in my life. But it was really an honor to be able to tell her story. And I've been in touch with her descendants. And honestly, Mary was named a traitor, and they believed her a traitor. And I believe she was wrongfully named a traitor and wrongfully lost everything, because during that time, 3 women were named traitors in the American Revolution: Mary, her sister, and a minister's wife. And I thought, well, what did these women do wrong? Well, in fact, I don't believe they did anything wrong. I believe they were the only women who owned property in the colony of New York at significant value. And I believe that's why they were named traitors. So being able to explore this relationship was quite amazing. And I can't tell you what a journey, what it's been like to be in this world. And I'm just glad that I'm part of it, and being able to be with you and fellow readers. It's just quite fun. Steve, you have a question. Oh, yes, thank you for asking. So at CBS, after I wrote the second book, they asked me if I would be interested in starting a book club. And it's been quite fun, and we're able to basically spotlight 3 books, and thousands of people vote as to which one we should read together. So it's called the CBS New York Book Club, and they call it Club Calvi, which is quite nice of them. And then we're able to interview the authors and bring a face to the names. Just recently, Mitch Albom was our profile, and thousands of people voted to read Mitch Albom's book, The Little Liar. And then I had a beautiful opportunity to interview him, and then we do a book club meetup where the readers ask questions of the authors. So they had lots of questions for Mitch Albom, as you can imagine. And so that was really a wonderful opportunity. So if you're interested, it's just clubcalvi.com. You can come along too and just vote if you want on our next read. Our next book was just voted on. It's The Next Mrs. Parrish. I don't know if any of you if you read that first book. It was a Reese, I think, book club pick, and Liv Constantine, they're 2 sisters, and they wrote this next one that I'm looking forward to reading as well. But I know you have a wonderful program coming up here at the summer reading program, so that's really exciting. But I am here to answer any questions that you might have. I'll be signing with Peggy and Carol too. But please, oh yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Where did you go to college for journalism?
Where did I go to college for journalism? I went to Syracuse University. It's a Newhouse School of Communications. And early on, I was always kind of a curious kid and was always interested in sort of, learning about different things. I spent actually a lot of time at my local library. At my house, we only had Italian newspapers because my parents were both from Italy. So I would have to go to the library in order to read, the New York Times and, all the regular papers. So I spent a lot of time at the library. And so I think that's where my love of journalism kind of began, and just my curiosity for people's stories. And so that's why I decided I really wanted to be a newspaper journalist. And when I got to Syracuse, the whole new thing was broadcast journalism. So it's been really a wonderful opportunity. Every day there's a new story. And so being in New York too, for certain, there's always breaking news to bring. But I worked at News 12 Long Island for a little while, and I really love all the folks there at News 12. And that was where my start was, with the News 12 group. And then I went over to CBS. And I don't know if any of you watch Inside Edition, but I've had the opportunity. I fill in for Deborah Norville, and that's been really nice to be able to be with those folks. Yeah, it's a great team. Does anyone have any other questions?
Did you sleep?
Do I sleep? That's such a good question. I would like to sleep more, but I'm so caught up with everything that's going on in the world. I have 3 children as well, and my husband's the mayor of our town, so it's pretty busy in our house, but it's really a lot of fun. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Yonkers, New York. That's where my parents came by boat from Italy, past the Statue of Liberty, and ended up in Yonkers, and everybody's still there. So the whole family is there, surrounded by my brother and my sister, and we're all there. And it's really nice to be able to have family close, because when I have this crazy schedule, thankfully, as the kids are growing up, I had mom, thankfully, to help me out throughout. So it's been a really wonderful thing. Well, great. Well, I am here. Please feel free to ask me anything, and it's just such a pleasure to talk to all of you, and I really appreciate you coming out. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to pick out the raffle, but please don't blame me, because then I'll feel bad. I know. I'm not going to even look. I'm not going to look. Okay. I'm not looking. Okay, let me go. Should I read it? Okay. Oh. This one I opened. It is Fran Fox. Fran's the winner. Congratulations. Is there one more? Yeah. Okay. Okay. This one is, tell me, you think it's Tony Klein? Tammy! You know what, I should put my glasses on. See? Oh, of course it's Tammy. Sorry, Tammy. And I believe there are refreshments too. Well, thank you again, everybody. Nice to see you.